Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports, where today the second round of the NHL playoffs is over. It's time to preview the Eastern and Western Conference final in the NHL. Guys, thank you all for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. Thank you for joining us here at I-80 Sports. Make sure you've subscribed down below, youtube.com/NHL on I-80 Sports. Join the conversation down below. What did you guys think of the semifinal matchups in the second round? What are your predictions for the Eastern and Western Conference final? Who goes on to the Stanley Cup? Join us in the conversation down below. Hit the like button if you like our content and hit the bell notification for when you know our content goes live. I'm Brian. He's Tom. Tom, how are you doing today?
Doing well, and here we are. We are in the conference finals. It's 3/4 of the same matchups as last year. One team is not there, unfortunately, but that's besides the point. Matchups look to be pretty good. There's maybe one team I dislike out of the four. There's one team I don't care for, and I like the two teams out west, and I think it should be a good series. So let's just get right to it.
Jumping right on into this, before we preview the Eastern Conference Final and then the Western Conference Final, we got to reflect on what happened in the second round. So, in the second round, we had quite a bit happen, and if you're a Toronto fan, you are probably a little upset at the moment, but we'll break that down in just a second. Breaking it all down on the Eastern side of things, coming out of the matchup between the Washington Capitals and the Carolina Hurricanes, Carolina easily handled the Washington Capitals 4-1. So they finished them off in 5 games. Kind of surprising. I thought Washington was going to have a little bit more fight in them, but honestly, that's how tough Carolina's been this year. On the other side of the bracket in the Eastern Conference, we had the Florida Panthers versus the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto pushing Florida to the brink, forcing a Game 7 after a big win in Game 6 after giving up a 2-0 lead in the series, by the way. Florida coming out on top very handedly in Game 7 and leaves many question marks for the Toronto Maple Leafs going into the summertime, but we'll unpack that in just a second. On the Western side of the bracket, very similar results here, specifically with the Edmonton Oilers versus the Vegas Golden Knights. Edmonton coming out on top 4-1 in that series, winning after Game 5. Pretty decisive victory there for Edmonton. So tail of the tape on the Western and Eastern Conference side. So pretty similar trajectories there. And then finally, between the Winnipeg Jets and the Dallas Stars, Dallas coming out on top after Game 6, winning that series 4-2 against the reigning President's Trophy winner, Winnipeg Jets. So some questions for possibly looming for the Winnipeg Jets as well. So let's unpack this a little bit here, Tom. What jumped out to you? What surprised you? And I'll probably save talking about Toronto separately, just because that seems to be a topic that deserves its own little asterisk, honestly. So just overall reflections, was there anything that jumped out to you, anything surprising, or anything that you expected to see?
I mean, at this point, no. Everyone said I was crazy calling Carolina in 5. I said all year I wasn't buying what Washington was selling. They were top heavy. They were relying entirely too much on a 39-year-old to score most of their goals. They didn't really have anybody to back them up besides Tom Wilson. The goaltending was suspect. Their D was just okay, but I would reckon to say that Carolina's D and their D were a wash. So it didn't really surprise me to see Washington go out the way they did. It really didn't. I think that Washington was a real flash in the pan this year. I do. I think next year they're going to be a bubble team, or maybe even right back out of the playoffs. I mean, I don't want to say again, because the last time they missed was 2 years ago. But I don't think that the domination that you saw this year, or maybe a surprise in my eyes that you saw of the Washington Capitals this year, I don't think will repeat next year. Doesn't surprise me that they were out in 5 games. And in my eyes, they just didn't look good. They didn't look good in that series. They just never seemed to find their groove. They were playing against a much deeper team, a much more in-depth team. And at the end of the day, when you're depending on a 39-year-old to do the job for you, we only scored 1 goal. Get past him, there wasn't much. So Washington didn't surprise me. They went out in 5, despite surprising a lot of other people. Vegas here is an interesting one. I want to tell you why. I thought the series would be much closer. Vegas is 2 years off a Stanley Cup win. They returned the majority of the same team. They're a team that is out to win every year. And they were one last-second goal away from being swept. That Riley Smith goal doesn't go in Game 3. There's a chance that this thing is over in a 4-game sweep to the Oilers. This was just, I would say almost domination by the Oilers. Obviously, one game went to OT and one game was close with that Riley Smith goal. But all the other ones, I feel like the Oilers dominated. Even the OT in Game 5, I'm watching Game 5 and I'm just saying to myself, I'm going, I just don't think that the Oilers are going to be taking Vegas back to Edmonton with them. I think the Oilers are going to be walking out of here tonight, going to the Western Conference Finals yet again now. Vegas is another interesting team. They're still very stacked. They still have a prime Jack Eichel. They got to get him re-signed. I fully expect them to get him re-signed. But I always say it's most of the tail of the tape. McDavid and Draisaitl, 6 points apiece in this series. Bouchard, 5 points. Those are their top 3 guys. Look at Vegas. Eichel had 5 points, but yet again, it was a 4 nations effort by Jack Eichel. Point per game, yes. Not 1 goal in the back of the net in this entire series. Again, Eichel wilting against McDavid just like he wilted against him in the 4 Nations final. Outside of that, respectable series by Mark Storm, respectable series by William Karlsson, Riley Smith with his heroics. But after that, it didn't look too good. Thomas Hertl didn't do much of anything. I'm just looking at I'm looking up and down. Ivan Barbashev, same thing, a ghost. Those are guys, Hertl wasn't there 2 years ago, obviously, so wiped that one right out. But, you needed a guy like Thomas Hertl to show up in this series. He didn't show up. And that was the big thing. They didn't get a lot of contributions for their depth. Well, the Oilers, once you got past McDavid, Draisaitl, and Bouchard, Corey Perry, 3 goals, 1 assist, 4 points. Another 39-year-old who's doing great things in these playoffs. RNH, all reliable on the team, 4 assists in 5 games. So the Oilers' depth showed up, and maybe on paper, Vegas may have looked a tad bit better. But the Oilers showed up, and I would say that maybe Vegas had the advantage in net too, as they had a solid goaltender. The Oilers were splitting time between Skinner and Picard and still won the series in 5. So very, very, very surprising that this series went 5 and almost could have been over in 4. And I guess we'll get to the elephant in the room now, the Toronto Maple Leafs. I don't know if you'd like to start with them. I can talk about them. Or would you like to maybe address the other teams first that surprised you or whatever?
I'll address the other teams first because you're going to find out in just a second. I created my own little banner here for Toronto, so I'm going to just kind of gloss over the other series real quick, kind of piggyback on what you were saying. Going in reverse order of what you were talking about with the Vegas Golden Knights versus the Edmonton Oilers. What's disappointing from Vegas is I feel like for such a talented team to really show no real fight against Edmonton. Edmonton outclassed them in a lot of different ways, but they needed contribution from specific guys in this series, and I feel like they didn't quite get that from certain individuals. You mentioned Tomas Hertl before, and I agree with you on that one. In 11 games, 5 points, he was playing 18 minutes a night. If you're playing 18 minutes a night as a forward, you have to be contributing more than just 5 points in 11 games. This is a guy that they're relying on to be one of their top line guys. And at 31, I refuse to believe that Hertl is, starting to trend downward. I still think that he is still a very good player in the NHL. He had 61 points in 73 games this year. I'm disappointed by what he did this year. Beyond that, other guys that I think kind of jump out to me, Ivan Barbashev, 2 points in 11 games. He was a -9. He was a non-factor in a lot of different ways. Pavel Dorofeyev as well, 2 points in 8 games as well, in the games that he did get to play. they needed contribution. They needed more guys to really kind of show up. In for other players that were kind of disappointing to me, Aiden Hill did not have that great of a series against Edmonton. He finished the playoffs with an 887 save percentage and a 2.93 goals against average. Vegas needed to do more, plain and simple. And they were a strong team. I expect them to be a strong team next year. Like Tom mentioned before, I do expect them to get a deal done with Jack Eichel at some point over the next year, because that's absolutely looming over their heads, and he's going to be the hottest free agent after next year. So Vegas needs to get that done for sure. Other teams, so Washington versus Carolina. Or actually, no, let's go to Winnipeg versus Dallas. It was a great series. I thought Winnipeg played very, very well. They dealt with the injury bug, and the unfortunate passing of Mark Scheifele's father, I think, absolutely was a contributing factor at the very end of that series.
Forgot to mention that.
Yeah, I think that absolutely was a contributing factor. I love the classy nod by Dallas, by their organization, in offering to fly Mark Scheifele and his family back for the funeral. He declined, and actually the Jets ended up taking their own personal jet, as well as other teammates, to go to Mark Scheifele's father's funeral as well. Really, really classy, if you ask me. But I know we complained at Four Nations that we feel like we didn't get enough contribution from guys like Kyle Connor. He showed up and showed out in the playoffs for Winnipeg this year. He was not a reason why Winnipeg did not do well. 17 points in 13 games. He had 5 goals and 12 assists. He was fantastic. And if you're looking at Winnipeg for next year, I think they're going to be an early Stanley Cup favorite next year, especially depending on the moves that they make in the offseason. I think they can still build on what they have in this lineup. The median age of this lineup, just kind of looking and eyeballing it on paper right now, is about 29 years old. They're right in the wheelhouse of competitiveness. Like, they can really, really make some noise in the Western Conference, depending on what certain teams do in the offseason. I mentioned Mark Scheifele before, 11 points in 11 games as well. He played very, very well throughout the playoffs. Another person that's probably not getting enough praise, Mason Appleton. In only averaging less than 15 minutes a night, he had 7 points in 13 games. He was really making some plays out there and doing a lot of the little things really, really well. And then Adam Lowry also coming up with 4 clutch goals throughout the playoffs as well. This was a really good, bigger showing for Cole Perfetti as well in the playoffs too. I know a lot of people would probably want me to talk quite a bit about Connor Hellebuck and how bad he was in the first round. And that's true. He was really, really bad in the first round. Not a Vezina caliber goaltender, nor a Hart caliber goaltender in the first round. In the second round, I thought he redeemed himself a little. I thought he really did play really well in the second round of the NHL playoffs against Dallas. And I think he played his heart out. I think he really started to redeem himself, despite the fact that he finishes the NHL playoffs this year with an 866 save percentage and a 3.08 goals against average. You really have to kind of take into account those first 7 games that he played in the first round. Yeah, Dallas is a very good team, and we're definitely going to be going in depth on that one when we break down the Western Conference Final. Lastly, the Winnipeg Jets, not Winnipeg Jets, the Washington Capitals that I want to talk about here. Yeah, it's disappointing that they kind of laid a big fat goose egg against the Carolina Hurricane. I almost forgot who they played. But look, Dylan Strome was for real throughout the playoffs. He had 11 points in 10 games. Alex Ovechkin still coming up with 5 goals in 10 games as well at 39 years old. I mean, that's more than what we probably could have said of what he was doing when he was much younger, to be honest. Tom Wilson also showed up quite a bit as well, 7 points in 10 games. And I'm impressed that he only had 14 penalty minutes. That is an impressive stat to me for fans of Tom Wilson and alike. But you look up and down in terms of like contribution, some guys just didn't show up. I know Ryan Leonard, I hyped him of like he could be a dark horse in the playoffs. He only averaged 10 minutes throughout both rounds. only had 1 point in 8 games. He's really going to get the true test at the NHL level next year. I think we only really got to see a cup of coffee with him. So I'll be interested to see what we get there. Alexi Protas, yeah, he didn't get to play a lot due to injury and just kind of catching the injury bug, but 2 points in 6 games. And I know he was probably playing hurt, and that certainly hurts for the Washington Capitals. I still also think, spoiler alert, I think Washington could very well be a playoff team next year and kind of build upon this performance. One player that kind of jumped out to me, though, that was impressive, and I don't think it was fully his fault for losing this series, was Logan Thompson. A .917 save percentage, a 2.41 goals against average. I thought he played really well overall. I thought he did the best that he possibly could, given the situation with Washington not playing in front of him and just not giving him the proper offense on a nightly basis. Kind of disappointing to see Carolina going into a hot series against the Florida Panthers. It's going to be a fun one. But now we've got to talk a little bit about the Toronto Maple Leafs. And there is a bit to unpack here because it feels like this is cyclical. We get to the beginning of the NHL season and people talk about, oh, this is their year. No, nobody's beating them in the Atlantic this year. They're the top team in the Atlantic. They got Austin Matthews. They've got Willie Nylander. They've got Mitch Marner. They've got John Tavares. No team is beating this team. This is the year. This is the year. They've got a better goaltender. They've got Anthony Stolarz now. They've got a better defensive core now because they picked up Chris Tanev and they re-signed him. And we hear this year in and year out, and this and that move and this move and that move. I feel like for the last 3 years now, I have been saying the Toronto Maple Leafs cannot come back with the same lineup that they did the year before. And what do they do every single time? They bring back Austin Matthews. They bring back Willie Nylander. They bring back Mitch Marner. They bring back John Tavares because they're pretty much stuck with him. But, all of these guys, I've said you've got to break up the boys club. Now you actually have the opportunity to in the offseason simply because you're losing Mitch Marner and John Tavares to free agency. Whether it's a good thing or bad thing, whether they're the right guys that you need to give up at this point. But I'm sorry. This leadership crew with Toronto, it is not Berube's fault that Toronto lost this series. It is not his fault at all. I mean, you could blame a little bit of the motivation factor, but this, in my mind, falls on one particular individual. And I don't care if I'm being unfair about this one. And Tom, you can certainly play devil's advocate on this one. But in my mind, this falls on Austin Matthews not lighting a fire under his team's belly. Like, why did it take Mitch Marner in Game 7, middle of the game, to finally tell his team, and I'll censor myself, wake the you-know-what up? Why is that not coming from Austin Matthews? Why is that not coming from him, who looks just like he's just there to earn a paycheck on the bench? He just hanging his head. Woe was me. And like I said, I don't care if I get eviscerated, but that's how I feel. I think Austin Matthews, in my mind, in my opinion, which is a dirty O word, he is a soulless captain. There's no energy to him. And I felt the same exact way at Four Nations with him captaining Team USA. And if he's captaining Team USA in the Olympics this upcoming year, I'll be upset. Tom, I'll let you go a little bit more in depth before I break down numbers.
Okay, well, before I go into what happened with the Leafs, the reason I glossed over the Winnipeg-Dallas series is just because, to me, it was as predictable as possible. I thought Dallas would come out of it. I thought they'd come out of it in 6. I think Winnipeg is still a playoff team, but they were just like Washington. I did not expect, I did not buy what they were selling. I think they'll be back in the playoffs next year. I don't think they'll win the President's Trophy next year. I don't think they'll be a Stanley Cup favorite next year. It was classy gesture by Dallas, what they did for Mark Scheifele. It was sad that it had to end that way. Hellebuck did play a little bit better as it went on, but I think next year, while we're on the Olympics, Ottinger's getting the nod next year.
I think so too.
Now on to the Leafs. It's crazy. It really is. Say what you will about Austin Matthews. He's a goal scorer. He's one of the better players in the league. I still never quite understood why they stripped John Tavares of the C and gave it to him. Tavares should probably still be captain of that team. And as far as the Olympics are concerned, I think that they know well enough to not give him the C next year. Whoever it might be, I don't really know. Probably Brady Tkachuk. I don't know. But it definitely won't be him. As far as this whole debacle is concerned, Florida is just one of those teams, and I know it well as a Ranger fan last year, that you need to put your foot on the jugular when you have them down. You know, they won 2 close games in games 1 and games 2. 5-4 and 4-3. You go down for that pivotal game 3 in Florida. You're up 3-1 at one point. You come back to tie it, and then you still lose it in overtime. They lost that series in game 3. They needed a goal from either Austin Matthews in overtime or maybe somewhere in the second period to put them back up by 3, to put them up by 3 goals. It never happened. And they got nobody to blame but themselves. They let Florida walk right back into that series. They let their old nemesis, Brad Marchand, come right back in. And now, for a guy who's supposed to be brought in for depth, he's one of the top point getters in the playoffs, mostly because of that series. Their old nemesis, their old Boston Bruins nemesis, actually led the Panthers in scoring this series with 8 points in 7 games. 3 goals, 5 assists for a guy who was just brought in to be like a Vladimir Tarasenko last year. And he led the whole team in scoring, ahead of guys like Alexander Barkov and Matthew Tkachuk. Now you're Toronto. You really got it. At this point, I don't know what you do if they're them. I don't know what you do. I think Marner's walking. I think he's had enough. There. I think that he doesn't like Berube, number 1. I think he's had enough of the criticism. I think that a team like Chicago will probably walk right in with a boatload of cash and say, here, come play with Bedard. I think he's gone. Tavares is going to be interesting. He's 34 years old. You got to re-sign him, but for how much and how long? And if he walks, then are you really comfortable with your leadership core being Austin Matthews and William Nylander? And in free agency, who do you try to go out and get if you can go out and get anybody? And at this point, does it even matter to work? The Leafs are a head scratcher. They really are. I thought in game 3, when Tavares scored in the third period, that this team was going to finally get themselves in the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time since 2002. And yet again, here we are, yet again, wondering what happened to the Toronto Maple Leafs. How did they blow another Game 7 on home ice? How did they blow another Game 7 to a team not named the Boston Bruins? And just how, the real answer, the real question is just how. How? And yet again, it's 58 years now without a Stanley Cup in what is supposedly the center of the hockey universe. And it's a team that is very hard to say, well, if we do this, we'll be better. If we do that, we'll be better. Or if we go out and get this guy. At this point, they've tried every possible thing to get better. I don't know what can get them better anymore. The goaltending, who can you go out and get? I don't know. I've always said maybe they need to get a better number 1 defenseman than Morgan Riley. Who can you go out and get at this point? I don't know.
Here's a sad but fun fact. Since the NHL lockout in 2004-2005, the Buffalo Sabres, who, mind you, have not gotten into the playoffs and have not played a postseason game in 14 years. The Buffalo Sabres has more series wins than the Toronto Maple Leafs since the NHL lockout. The Buffalo Sabres have 4 series wins. Toronto has 2. Now, yes, Buffalo also got 2 of those series wins in 1 year and then 2 in the following year. I believe it was 2007, 2008, and then 2008, 2009. Regardless, that's a sad but fun fact. I don't even know what the context of that was, but I just thought everybody needed to be cursed with that knowledge. I mean, but to me, if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, I think there's a few things that need to happen. I think number 1, Craig Berube really needs to sit down with the front office and say, look, here are my notes from this past year. This is what I'm thinking leadership core wise going forward. We're at a crossroads. This is what I would do. Because I think Berube certainly earned that level of trust with franchises that have hired him at this point. Now, yeah, there are people that can naysay, but this is his team. And right now, a lot of how this team is built is still Sheldon Keefe's team from a few years ago. So if Berube wants to create some form of identity that is his team, he needs to establish his leadership group. And, to Tom's point before, does he really want to go into next year with his leadership group centered around Austin Matthews and Willie Nylander? I think you're okay if you go in with at least Willie Nylander, but I think the question becomes like, look, Austin Matthews is going to be a free agent in 2 years. Do you consider possibly moving off of that contract? And if so, who would be willing to take the entire contract, and what kind of trade would that possibly look like? Because if there is that level of dissatisfaction amongst not only the ownership group, but also the fan base, because we saw all of the jerseys that were hitting the ice on during game 5 and even during game 7. I mean, what is left to do at that point? Do you try to trade him? Do you hope next year's a little bit better once you remove the Marner factor, if you let Tavares walk? But you can't let both guys walk. You need to try to retain one of them. And if you don't retain both of them, then you've got to do something savvy to make up for the lost scoring from both of them. Tavares had a renaissance year this year. John Tavares this year in the regular season had 74 points in 75 games. He had 38 goals. Mitch Marner had 102 points in 81 games this year. He had 75 assists, but he also had 27 goals. So you need to try to find 65 goals to try to replace if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs at that point, which sounds like Moneyball. Great movie with Brad Pitt if you've never seen it. But a lot to think about for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I don't know. I think this is a really good opportunity to balance your team a little bit. You have your top scorers in Austin Matthews and William Nylander. Fill out that bottom 6 a little bit better. Fill out your defensive core a little bit better. You're saving money by letting Marner and Tavares walk. You also need to pay Matthew Knies in the offseason too. I think he's earned a little bit better of a contract going into next year, as well as maybe a high profile first line kind of duty going into next year without Mitch Marner there. So I think Toronto is going to have to try to get creative with how they're going to use their cap. I think this is a perfect opportunity for them to really kind of build outward, focus on the defense, focus on the bottom 6. Don't be so top heavy going into next year. And maybe we could actually be talking about Toronto maybe not being that fake top team and talking about this is their year. Well, maybe if you actually build a complete team, maybe it will be their year. So tragedy, glimmer of hope going forward, but Toronto fans, I'll have fun drinking your tears for tonight, at least. Any last thoughts, Tom, before we move on to our previews?
I mean, I know you had said do it more in Berube's image, but bringing in Scott Lawton and Brandon Carlo at the trade deadline, wasn't that it? Wasn't kind of that it? Weren't those kind of Berube players? The thing with him is it's not a knock on Craig Berube, but he is a short shelf life coach. I maybe give them one more year with him before they're calling for his head. Maybe they'll do a little bit better next year. Maybe they'll go on another playoff run next year. But 2 years from now, I could see the fans in Toronto wanting him out of there too. It didn't work in St. Louis for long. He won that cup. They had a good year the following year. And then after that, that team fizzled out. That team fizzled out and went nowhere.
Yeah. And you're not wrong. You're not wrong. And you could also say the same argument for a lot of coaches. Almost every NHL coach is hired to be fired. I think the only exceptions at the moment right now are the likes of guys like John Cooper, who also might not be long for Tampa Bay after the next year or so. Once his contract's up, I could see him easily going to Utah. Honestly.
And it's a conundrum with Matthews too, as you brought up. He's royalty in Toronto, but he's never won anything. Quite similar to Doug Gilmour and Boris Salming. But at the same time, If you trade him, what do you get back? Number one. Number two, who would even take the contract? That's the other problem. So they're basically, the Leafs are stuck right now.
Yeah.
They're stuck. And I like I said, I was never sure Berube was the right guy for this job. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. You have to hope, like I said, gotta hope that they can extend Tavares. I don't think Marner's back. And then you sit there and hope that they can build off it. You got to sit there and hope that you're in a division right now that's interesting, to say the least. You got to hope that Florida runs out of gas at some point in the next couple of years. You got to hope Tampa gets old. And you got to hope that maybe the building that Ottawa and Montreal did this year, maybe they don't build as quickly on it as many other people think. And maybe that'll help preserve this team.
Well, the good news for Toronto, too, is it seems like Boston is almost certainly bound to be bottom feeders next year. I actually project right now Boston to probably be the bottom team in the Atlantic Division, maybe even the entire Eastern Conference next year. I think they're gunning for that number one overall pick next year, if you ask me. So that at least will help Toronto and also probably get some ghosts away from them too. But it's just certainly going to be a situation that we track throughout the summertime based on the moves in free agency that they do, who they lose in the summertime as well. It's all going to be quite interesting if you ask me. But let's talk Eastern Conference Finals right now, and that before we move on to the Western Conference Finals. So the Eastern Conference Finals, the matchup is the Florida Panthers versus the Carolina Hurricanes. Currently, there's been one game played at this point. We're recording on May 21st on Wednesday, the day after the game one of the Eastern Conference Finals, and Florida already up 1-0 on Carolina, serving Carolina their first home loss of the playoffs. So that's a little bit of an interesting nugget there. Let's predict this, Tom. Who wins and why?
Well, last night we saw kind of a display of domination by Florida. A lot of people thought that Carolina could pull an upset here because they come at you 100 miles an hour. They handled Washington pretty well, like I had predicted. Last night was just straight up domination by these Panthers. As fast and as aggressive as Carolina are, they literally jumped off everything kind of on a counter last night. The game was never close. At one point, we're up 5-1. Power play firing on all cylinders and getting contributions from everybody, which is kind of what Carolina relies on. What's different about Florida is their top guys are just a little bit better. If we go position by position and line by line here, in goal, you have Bobrovsky. You're legit. You're number one. You're a legit starter. Versus between Anderson and Kochetkov again for the second straight year, it's a wash to Florida. They're better in goal. They're better in goal. You go back on D. Hold on, I'm just scrolling up. You have on your third pair Nate Schmidt, Dmitry Kulikov versus Shane Gostisbehere and Scott Morrow. Give that to Florida. Your second pair, Dmitry Orlov and Sean Walker with Carolina versus Nico Mikkola and Seth Jones. I go Florida again. Your first pair is actually where I go Carolina. Jacob Slavin, best defensive defenseman in the NHL, and old reliable Brent Burns on the top pair. Okay, we'll give that to Carolina. But Florida's better back on D. And now we look out on forward. Carolina is known for their kind of everybody has a set role with their forwards. Everybody chips in. Florida did that last night. So your fourth line, AJ Greer, Thomas Nosek, and Yona Gadjevich. I've heard his name. I'm butchering it. I'm sorry. Versus Robinson, Kokanyemi, and Blake. I'd say that's probably even. That's probably a wash. Third line, Eetu Luostarinen, Anton Lundell, and the rat Brad Marchand versus Jordan Martinook, Jordan Still, and William Carrier. This goes to Florida by a long shot. Marchand was brought in this year to do similar things to what Vladimir Tarasenko did last year. Tarasenko, by the time the Rangers series started last year, had about 6 points. Marchand just had 8 points in the Toronto series. Florida's third line, believe it or not, is better than their third line last year, which I didn't think could be possible. Go up to your second line, Taylor Hall, Jack Roslovic, Logan Stankoven versus Carter Verhaeghe, Sam Bennett, Matt Tkachuk, wash to Florida. And your first line, Evan Rodriguez, Sasha Barkov, Sam Reinhart versus Andrei Svechnikov, Sebastian Aho, and Seth Jarvis. Goes to Florida again. Maybe not by a lot, but still goes to Florida. That being said, Florida's your defending champions. And they're firing on all cylinders right now, like something I haven't seen since maybe the 1998 Detroit Red Wings. This team is scary. I'm mad at them still for last year, for taking the Stanley Cup away from the Rangers. But in no way, shape, or form do I see Carolina getting getting 4 wins against these guys. I know I said 2, and maybe that's what they'll get. I got to go Florida in 6 here. I can't see Carolina. I can't see Carolina beating them, taking 4 games from this team. That being said, when you look over who's out west, this will probably be the last dominant. Not saying they dominated Tampa. Toronto series was close. They were almost out of it. But this will probably be the last time where you say they're overwhelmingly the better team in a series. I think when they get to the finals this year, it might not be as lock, stock, and barrel as it was a year ago. But right now, I got to give them this series in 6 games. And I'm even being generous with that 6 games. We got to see what happens over the next 2. I could easily see this being over in 4 or 5. We have to see what happens over the next 2. But just in every inconceivable aspect of this series, they are better than maybe the first pair of defensemen. It is what it is. I hate to say it, but it's true.
I think you're also being a little too nice right now in terms of who could come out on top. Here's a little bit of an interesting tidbit from breaking down, the point getters right now in the NHL playoffs and scoring depth. Here's an insane stat for the Florida Panthers. So most teams that I've looked at, when looking at who had like double-digit point getters right now across the NHL playoffs of teams that reached the second round, each of those teams had about 2 or 3 guys in double digits in points. Florida has 8 players with double-digit points. They are really spreading the wealth across the board. Your top point getter right now is Eetu Luostarinen with 13 points in 13 games. Mind you, he's only averaging 16 minutes a night playing on that third line with Anton Lundell, who also has 10 points in 13 games, and Brad Marchand, who was the top point getter in round 2 for Florida and also has 12 points in 13 games so far in the playoffs as well. Just impressive. Like, just listen to this line. Luostarinen, 13 points. Brad Marchand, 12 points. Alexander Barkov, 11 points. Sam Reinhart, 11 points. Carter Verhaeghe, 10 points. Matthew Tkachuk, 10 points. Anton Lundell, 10 points. Sam Bennett, 10 points. And then even going beyond that, Aaron Ekblad, 7 points in 9 games. Nate Schmidt, 7 points. Seth Jones, 6 points. Evan Rodriguez, 6 points. They are getting constant contribution every single game. They are playing Paul Maurice style hockey, like we heard in, I believe, what was it, Amazon Prime that did a little thing last year building up to the Stanley Cup playoffs, basically like on hot mics, where Paul Maurice, told his team, forget the plays, pound their D zone until they have nothing left. And that is what Florida has done. They have worn down every single opponent, and they've done it very effectively, and they've done it well. Just impressive across the board by Florida. Now, that doesn't mean that Carolina hasn't done anything well. Carolina has had a very good playoff so far this year. Freddie Anderson might be the best goaltender left in the playoffs right now with a .919 save percentage and a 1.74 goals against average. So long as he stays healthy in this round, he's going to provide some trouble for Florida. But you also have some contribution as well from Carolina. Seth Jarvis, 12 points in 11 games. Sebastian Aho, 11 points in 11 games. Andrei Svechnikov, 10 points in 11 games. And one player I do want to give a shout to, Shane Gostabert, 8 points in 11 games. He has really really come back to close to elite form with the Carolina Hurricanes. I really thought that his career was going to kind of be in limbo, kind of bouncing from team to team. He's really found his footing so well under Rod Brindamore's system. And he's playing this system so well. And he has been an offensive unit on the blue line for the Carolina Hurricanes this year. But you just look up and down this line. Carolina has a very impressive lineup. Florida really, truly impresses me that much more. And I tried to warn people going into the playoffs, Florida is a team to beat. I said if they got past Tampa Bay, they will get past anybody in the Eastern Conference. And they did it handedly. And I think that they're going to go past Carolina handedly as well. My prediction, and this is going to be bold, I'm going to go out and say it, Florida in 4. I think we see a clean sweep. Honestly, I think if there's any team that they are going to sweep in this playoffs, part of me, I want to be a little bit petty just because Carolina knocked out the New Jersey Devils, but whatever. I can say it. It's my prediction. Florida in 4. That's my prediction. I think they've just been on that heavy of a hot streak. Moving on to the Western Conference Finals, it's the Edmonton Oilers versus the Dallas Stars. This, I think, is going to be a much closer matchup and a really, really fun series to watch, if you ask me. So, Tom, who comes out of this series out on the other end to the Stanley Cup Final? Do you think we see a Stanley Cup repeat from last year, which we have not seen since 08 and 09?
Well, short answer, no.
Damn it.
And I'm going to explain to you why. But I want to look at the point totals first. And this one, before as we go into it, has not started yet. Puck has probably already dropped if it hasn't already. It's 8:25 right now. So the game when all the TV BS probably just started. So, with that being said, I don't know why this isn't showing me playoff stats. I want this to show me playoff stats, and it's not, and it's very upset. It's very annoying. That's the point. So, while I try to figure this out, we'll talk about what happened last year. We talked about this series last year because it's the second year in a row, and I talked last year about how Dallas, as deep as they are, needs a game breaker. That Edmonton had 2 of. They needed that top guy. They needed a guy who could put their team on their back last year. And I said last year, as good as Johnson and Robertson were, they were kind of maybe relying a little too much on Joe Pavelski last year. Obviously, Pavelski has since retired. And they since replaced him with someone who is a well-suitable replacement, and that player is Mikko Rantanen. Unlike last year, where Dallas' scoring was kind of bunched together, they weren't at the top of playoff scoring, but all their players were kind of close, and no one was close to anybody Edmonton had last year points-wise. It's different this year. Mikko Rantanen has been on fire. 19 points in 13 games. He leads the playoffs in scoring this year. Not to knock at what Edmonton's doing either. McDavid and Draisaitl, yet again, have had respectable playoffs this year. If you look at their totals, where is it here? Because this hockey reference does not want to cooperate with me. It gives when I go on the series page, it just gives me their regular season stats, which I don't want. McDavid has 14 points in 11 games. Draisaitl has 16 points in 11 games. Bouchard has 12 points in 11 games. And then after that, it's kind of a steep drop off to everybody else. Now, compare that to what Dallas is doing. Dallas has, because they want to make this difficult for me. Dallas obviously has Rantanen with 19 points in 13 games. Harley has 11 points in 13 games. Roope Hintz, 10 points in 13 games, and then it's kind of a drop off after that too. So I'll say it this year, point total wise, it's a little more even this year. Unlike last year where I said, I love Dallas's depth, but I don't know about their top end. Okay, Dallas has one top end player this year in comparison to Edmonton's 2. But that top-end player, Leon Draisaitl, has proven as the playoffs go on, he seems to slow down more and more, and the wear and tear shows on him a little bit more and more. So let's compare it by position, which I like to do. Obviously, Edmonton has Stuart Skinner starting this series. Picard is injured. Dallas has old, reliable, and a solid player in net and Jake Ottinger. The goaltending to Dallas, easy. We go back on D now. Edmonton's third pair, Jake Wollman and John Klingberg. Not a bad third pair. But then look at what Dallas has. Leon Bichelle, Ilya Lyubushkin. You could maybe say that's even, but I would maybe give that to Dallas. Go up. Esa Lindell and Cody Ceci. Lining up against Darnell Nurse and Troy Stetcher. Dallas, I'd say. Your first pair, Brett Kulak and Evan Bouchard, who's put up a ton of points this year, versus Thomas Harley and Miro Heiskanen. Dallas's contributions from these two top defensemen, they have two power play quarterbacks right now. Two power play quarterbacks. You got a guy to run PP1 and PP2 with these guys. Harley is actually running power play 1. Heiskanen's running power play 2. You have two elite power play quarterbacks playing together, where Edmonton has one who's respectable in Bouchard. Dallas, advantage on D by a landslide. Now we go forward line by forward line. Their fourth line, Trent Frederick, Matthias Janmark, Corey Perry. Lining up against Jamie Benn, Oscar Black, and Evgeny Dodonov. I'd actually say that's fairly even. Perry had himself a nice series in the second round against Vegas. So maybe I'll give that one to Edmonton. Third line, Mason Marchment, Sam Steele, Tyler Seguin. Going up against Evander Kane, Adam Henrique, and Connor Brown. I'd reckon to say Dallas might be a little bit better there, but you could say that's even too. Your second line, Jason Robertson, Matt Duchene, Wyatt Johnson. Versus Vasily Podkolzin, Leon Draisaitl, Kasperi Kapanen. Yes, I know how good Leon Draisaitl is. We know his point totals. I just went over them. That's just one player, though. Those three players on Dallas' second line are eons better, put together are eons better than what Edmonton has on their second line. And now we go line one. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Connor McDavid, and Zach Hyman. It's a good line one versus Mikael Granlund, their trade deadline acquisition, prize possession. Rupe Hintz, and playoff leading scorer, Mikko Rantanen. I love Connor McDavid. He's the best player out of those six. I got to give it to Dallas. That being said, this isn't going to be short. It's not. And I honestly could see this going 7, but I don't think it will. As good as Edmonton's been and as hungry as they are to get back, Dallas this year has that intangible that they didn't have last year. You have Rantanen playing out of his mind. Rantanen has won the Stanley Cup before. And I just think that the depth and Rantanen are just going to be and what Dallas is doing back on D, along with the decided advantage in goal, it's just going to be too much for these Edmonton Oilers to overcome. Dallas Stars win this series in 6 games to go to the Stanley Cup Finals finally. Dallas, who I always said I was always a head scratcher with them. Hey, is somebody gonna take that team on their back? And Mikko Rantanen is the guy. Dallas, I've liked what they've been doing the entire Stanley Cup playoffs. Dallas in 6.
I think that's a perfectly fine prediction. This series, and I know this is going to sound cliche, this series really could go any which way, if you ask me. I mean, on the one side, you have the top point getter in the playoffs playing for Dallas right now with Mikko Rantanen with 19 points in 13 games. He leads NHL playoff players right now with 9 goals in that time as well, which also leads the league. But on the other hand, you also have Connor McDavid on the other side of the coin. Connor McDavid for the Edmonton Oilers has 17 points in 11 games. He has 14 assists, which is the most assists in the NHL playoffs right now. And you also have the leading plus minus player for the Edmonton Oilers, and a guy that I kind of want to say, like, you got to give a little bit more credit when looking at the line combos, because you mentioned that between the third pairings between Edmonton and Dallas, that you gave the edge to Dallas with Leon Bichel and Ilya Lyubushkin. I actually think that Edmonton actually has that third pairing win by a landslide. Jake Wallman and John Klingberg have been one of the best pairings in the NHL playoffs this year. They have been really, really fun to watch. But beyond that, they have been so defensively responsible, so strong, have saved and bailed out Edmonton numerous times in the playoffs thus far. Honestly, I think we're seeing a renaissance here for John Klingberg in the playoffs here. I think he's really having a great audition for his services going into next year. Just really good play and probably one of the best deadline acquisitions that nobody really talked about, which was Jake Wallman going to the Edmonton Oilers from San Jose. I think that has been a big difference maker for the Edmonton Oilers and an X factor that's not getting talked about nearly enough for how steady his play has been. And I think he's going to continue that through this round as well. But looking at the rest of the stats here for the Edmonton Oilers, you're still getting contribution from numerous players. Leon Draisaitl, of course, with 16 points in 11 games. Evan Bouchard continuing his strong playoff play from last year with 12 points in 11 games as well. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, 9 points in 11 games. Zach Hyman, 8 points in 11 games. But we need to start seeing a little bit more production from certain players that are getting a little bit more time here in the playoffs. I want to see a little bit more potential contribution here from Adam Henrique on the offensive side of the coin with only 4 points in 11 games thus far. Yes, he has played a very good two-way game so far throughout the playoffs with 17 blocked shots, 32 hits as well. He's played quite well and also has been the best face-off getter so far for the Edmonton Oilers with a 58.9 face-off percentage in the playoffs as well. But I want to see some more offensive output from him with the time that he's getting on the ice, averaging about 15 minutes a night. I want to see him get a couple more points and, pop maybe a few important goals here for the Edmonton Oilers if I want to say that Edmonton has a real clear shot. Now, here's the real question mark for the Edmonton Oilers and the reason why I am not so keen on picking Edmonton right now, possibly to move on. And that's the goaltending situation here between Calvin Pickard and Stuart Skinner. Both guys have a sub 900 save percentage, and they're pretty even right now in terms of who's starting. Stuart Skinner got more games last round. So I would anticipate that he's probably going to end up getting the nod going into the Western Conference Final. But actually, let me confirm that for the Edmonton Oilers that he is in the starters net tonight. Yeah, he is the confirmed starter for tonight. And all of a sudden, my computer's going crazy and just scrolling up and down for no reason. I love that. But also Kevin Pickard's day to day as well. So we might not even see him this round. It's Olivier Rodriguez, which that was definitely the wrong pronunciation, but whatever. I got to see more from Skinner going into the Western Conference Final because staring you down on the other end of the ice is the best goaltender currently left in the playoffs in Jake Ottinger with a .919 save percentage and 2.47 goals against average. He's been everything and more for the Dallas Stars. Now, looking at Dallas, we mentioned Mikko Rantanen with 19 points in 13 games. Thomas Harley also has 11 points in 13 games as well. Rope Hintz, 10 points in 13 games. Wyatt Johnston, 8 points in 13 games. And Mikael Granlund, 7 points in 13 games. But again, I want to see a little bit more contribution from certain players. Tyler Seguin, I know he's just coming off an injury, but 5 points in 13 games, averaging about 15 minutes a night. Got to do more with that. Matt Duchene, also 5 points, no goals in that time as well, but certainly setting up some plays here. But 5 points in 13 games, and he's averaging about 17 minutes a night right now. I got to see a little bit more from guys that are expected to be in your top six. Tyler Seguin's part of that. Matt Duchene's part of that. Mason Marchment as well with 4 points in 13 games as well. I got to start seeing more from these guys if I can truly say, all right, they are the clear-cut team that's going to go to the Stanley Cup to face the Florida Panthers, because let's be real, whoever moves on is facing the Florida Panthers. But whatever. Who am I predicting to win this series? I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that it is going to be an agreement between Tom and I. I think it's going to be the Dallas Stars. but I am going to say that this goes 7 games. I think this is going to go to distance.
I hope it does.
I hope it does too. That's going to be a great series. But it also means that you're leaving Florida fully rested if they come out on top.
Live update: Edmonton just went up 1-0. I don't know who scored.
I guess we'll find out. But, as this game goes on, what do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree with our takes? Let us know down below and subscribe down below, youtube.com/NHL on I-80 Sports. Join the conversation. What did you think of our analysis? What do you think of the Toronto situation as well, if you want to comment down below? And what are your predictions for the Eastern and Western Conference Finals? Join the conversation down below. Hit the like button if you like our content and hit the bell notification so that way you guys know when our content goes live. But let's watch the Eastern and Western Conference Final. We'll join you at the beginning of the Stanley Cup Finals. But until then, I'm Brian. He's Tom. This has been our Eastern and Western Conference Finals predictions here at I-80 Sports.